You've used technology like podcasting and literature like graphic novels to improve student learning. How have you found students respond to more modern forms of storytelling like those?
They, I think they really like it, and part of, for me, like what I talked about. So I was a faculty fellow for teaching and learning in the faculty center for years, and a lot of the literature around teaching talks about that you have to tie what they're learning in the classroom to their lived experiences. What's the point of what you're doing? And this gets back to your earlier question about underserved populations and things like that, or first generation college students. So if we go back 25 or 30 years, you're just like, oh God, here he goes. Right? The types of students we would see in college were very similar. And there's nothing wrong with it, but like kind of very white middle class. That's who you sort of came, and so the population was very similar. The motivations to why they came to college were very similar. And so, but as that population diversified, you have people coming from different backgrounds and bringing different strengths and here for different reasons, right? Not just, a lot of them it is to get a degree and get a job, but for some people it's about, things we talked about, empowerment or helping their neighborhood or community. And so I think when you have these diverse experiences, you want to kind of be positive and like this strength focus, and they call it like asset. You don't see students who come from different backgrounds, or again, there's this term non-traditional. You don't look at their deficits and sort of say, well, they're unlike students we've had before, and they're kind of lacking this or lacking that. Like, that's the sort of negative deficit thinking. You want to get into asset thinking and saying, well, yeah, but they bring all these experiences and they bring perspectives that maybe we haven't had in academia or haven't been given a voice in academia. And so with like podcasting or like use of graphic novels, a lot of it is that we're not just talking about this theory so you can memorize it for an exam, but it's something that impacts society and it impacts your life. And so a few years ago, I was part of the Common Read, and we did the graphic novel They Called Us Enemy, which I used in my classroom to do, which is about, it's the story, so it's a graphic novel, but it's a true story of George Takei, who's an actor, and he was on the original Star Trek, but as a child, he and his family were interned in he was in a Japanese American internment camp during World War II. So his parents were citizens, but they were put in these camps. I think when you read something like that, it's interesting because students learn about history, right? But then you want to tie it to the themes of the book. So even if they're not of Japanese American descent, and even if they haven't, experienced something like that, you can tie it to their lived experiences of justice and injustice. And there are themes in the book too about how his parents really protected him. Like, weirdly, he has these like positive memories of this horrible experience because what they did was they kind of like didn't tell him about it, and they played games with him and tried to have fun. And so that's a theme in terms of like your parents protecting you, and that's a theme that students can tie back to their lived experience. So even if they come from a different culture and a different background, that they bring that. And even in that, I think when I taught my popular culture class, I had them create like a comic from their life, and I didn't care what the art looked like, right? It could be literally like stick figures, like that's not the point, or they could kind of, this was kind of pre-AI, but I think I would have either been okay if they kind of used, like it's not an art class, but it was like using this visual medium to tell their stories. And it gets back to this thing that I keep talking about. It's like application of knowledge, that you're not just giving them facts, but how do they take that knowledge and apply it to their own lived experiences. So even something like justice, how have they, like we talked about before, how have they experienced justice in their life? And even if they've come from a pretty privileged life where we're not talking about justice in terms of criminal justice or things like that, but like I said, maybe they've had something, they have an argument with their roommate about who does the dishes or things like that, and so can they take these concepts and apply them to their lives? And that same thing with podcasting was a similar sort of thing. So